Okay. I titled this section Rebellious Phase, and that's a little tongue in cheek because I think the rebellion I'm talking about, reflecting back on it, is like kind of normal kid stuff. um, but I was the son of a pastor. Um, uh, Josh, this might not be familiar to you, so I'll give a little bit of context for why I'm saying that. There is a stereotype in the Christian world, especially in like Christian leadership, of pastors' kids, even an acronym PK. Pastors' kids are notorious for like breaking out, and I think maybe acting out is like kind of a better phrase for it. Um, I got to high school, well, middle school and high school, really. And suddenly I was around a lot of people my own age who did not have any of the upbringing that I did, none of the structure that I did, none of the values imparted on that I did. And they were given a lot of opportunities to like try new and different things. Um, and when I got exposed to all of that, it was all completely foreign to me. Um, I share that in part because thinking about my decisions at that time, I really didn't have any context, for how to handle it.
Yeah.
um, so that led to like exposure to alcohol. I think I started smoking cigarettes around 15 years old. Um, I snuck out pretty regularly. My dad and I have talked about this quite a lot since. I just started behaving differently, and I honestly think it was in part like, let's see how this goes. you know?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, yeah. And it, to your point, I think it's somewhat normal kid stuff, but I also think it's just, again, like what we were talking about in the last section, from my point of view of all this structure to no structure, and then this rapid exposure to just like this different world, right?
Yep.
Like how could you not? And to be honest, I mean, maybe you would disagree, but I think that that path, if you reflect, like it's probably taught you a lot of good things, right? Like there are good things that have come from that time in your life, and the way that you can reflect on it now.
I think so. I think that at the time it was so challenging for everybody involved. My parents did not didn't really know what to do. Again, no like support systems to rely on other than a few people in our lives that we had built some relationships with. And you
Mm.
had this 14, 15-year-old kid who was just doing stuff that didn't make any sense. I think the only thing my parents really needed to do was ground me. Say you're not allowed to go talk to those people anymore. You're not allowed to be friends with those people anymore. We're going to take your cell phone away. And because it was just it like what else can we do but isolate you? You
Hmm.
know, um, my parents didn't have the tools to teach me how to engage with that stuff in a healthy way. My dad talked about, all through my childhood, he talked about having no interest in alcohol or drugs of any kind. I think the most my dad ever engaged with something like that was like an occasional glass of wine, and even then he was like not a fan.
Mm.
So without the tools to help me and like guide me through all of that, they did what they thought was best, which was most of the time just to try to cut it off, just to try to stop that engagement, stop that interaction. It led
Yeah.
to a lot of like questions for me,
Hmm.
because I think I started to recognize that like maybe they didn't know what maybe they didn't know what the right thing was. Um, I saw my friends, doing things that I've been told were really bad, but it didn't seem to be causing any real problems for them. and I, again, thinking back on this as a 15-year-old, like
Yeah.
I don't think I was right about that. I think they were probably right to be cautious about those things, but
Yeah.
it didn't click with me that there were any immediate consequences. Um, Josh, I remember 7 years old, I heard my first fire and brimstone sermon. Um, it scared the heck out of me. I remember I was at like a summer camp and this pastor came and spoke and said things that just sounded awful, you know. And he was talking about like behavior, like if you do the wrong things, you'll be punished, and so come to God because that's how you avoid that punishment. If you conform to what is prescribed here, you'll be better off. And it was weird to juxtaposition that with the behaviors of my peers and like not see that, not see them dealing with the immediate consequences of those things. I think what that led me to do is just like question a lot. But then I went to those same people, to my parents, to other authorities in my life, and I asked those questions, and they really couldn't tell me anything, you know. Um,
Yeah. Yeah, well, two things come to the immediate. I think I mean, when we talk about, and it came up a lot in our stream last week, right? You still like to question. You still like to dig
mhm.
deep and understand complex situations and understand why people are arriving at that, and then, politely and nicely question. So I think that was probably the breaking out of that, right? But then most importantly, I think it was critical, right? You needed to explore that. You needed to be able to shift your mind a little bit and think differently and act differently, right? I think it allowed you to shift into the person that you are today.
I think you're probably right. I mean, at the same time, gosh, it would have been nice to
Yeah.
to have some frame of reference.
Mm-hmm.
I do generally today take a stance of questioning my assumptions. Part of
Mm-hmm.
that is probably self-preservation, if I'm honest, because I recognize that if I don't do that, I might end up with the wrong answer. And if there's anything I'm concerned with, it's making sure that I have the right answers. But without any tools to evaluate, I I just struggled to know what the right thing was. Um, we'll talk in, I think, more reflection on this a little bit later, but this has also led to a lot of self-seeking. Well, I guess like seeking of self, like trying to look inside myself for my relationship with authority.
Yeah.
I was kind of taught, listen to authority. Authority knows what's best. And in that environment with no real authority that I could defer to, I was kind of forced to think on my own, and in doing so made a lot of poor choices. I don't
Yeah.
think that the consequences of those choices were much more than the disappointment of my parents. I never did anything that had lasting effects on me personally, but I did also hurt people. Um, I reflect back on some of my behavior with girls I had relationships with, and I was unkind, but I was also disrespectful.
Mm-hmm.
With my parents, I did and said things that, um, looking back on them, I'm not proud. I don't
Mm-hmm.
fault myself. By the time I was like 16, 17, I maybe should have known better, but I also didn't. I just didn't. I just didn't have that reference point. Um, and that kind of, I think, was the natural outcome of not being given those tools.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And I know we don't have time for it too, but good segue into, again, the conversation we had last week and really your foundation starting with the community. And you know, not to say that there wasn't a community or things outside of it, maybe it was just hard to find, but bringing that to people, helping people through community, I think is so important.
Yeah, I really do feel that
And so
yeah,
I don't know.
I absolutely feel like the the community aspect of this, it might have helped,
Yeah.
if I had some not guidance, but some mechanisms that I could go to,
Yeah.
um, that maybe wouldn't have been critical, or like not judged. I don't know what the right word is here, Josh. I just
Tough. Yeah.
to have had some place to go where I could say, look, I just need help with this.
Yeah.
I think that would have made a huge difference. Um, yeah, so
Absolutely.
we'll move into the next section here, because we'll talk a little bit more about high school and kind of transitioning into adulthood, and
Yeah.
then from there, I think going into some kind of conscious reflection on all this would be really great. So,
Awesome. Yeah. Look forward to it.
all right.